Well, it's another summer down here in Australia. And again, we've got issues with bushfires, this time down in Victoria in the Grampians and also across in Western Australia. I've seen some property loss there in the Grampians and significant stock losses. But we've got some people out there using these bushfires for their own political advantage, claiming it's all about climate change. And we need to take real action on climate change to stop these bushfires. We've even got our Prime Minister out there today claiming, and let me quote him directly, saying that these bushfires, quote, are becoming more frequent and more intense.
It's hard to look away from the tortured earth. An aerial view offering just a glimpse of the 76,000 hectare fire zone. The Prime Minister and Premier seeing firsthand the altered terrain.
We live in a country which has harsh conditions. The truth is they're becoming more frequent and more intense. They're becoming more frequent and more intense.
Well, we've always had bushfires in Australia, especially in Victoria. Victoria is home of the terrible Black Thursday bushfires of 1851, which gave rise to that famous painting by William Strutt, seen here, trying to illustrate the bushfires of the 1850s. And on those Black Thursday bushfires, an estimated 5 million hectares were lost. I know people are jumping up and down saying that these fires in the Grampians burnt out 75,000 hectares. Well, in that one in 1851, they say it was 5 million. Because then there was, of course, the terrible 1939 Black Friday bushfires in Victoria. But the question is, what does the data show? Are these bushfires getting more intense and more frequent, as the Prime Minister and these other grifters are claiming? Let's have a look at what the data says. Well, first we've got the satellite data from NASA, from the Copernicus satellite. And it's got some very telling data here. The first chart shows the weekly burnt areas. And we can see on this chart here the red line, which is for 2024. The blue line is the average of 2012 to 2023. And of course the grey is the minimum and maximum range over that period. So you can see here for the weekly burnt areas, for December this year, it has been one of the lowest on record and well below average. If we look at the next chart, which shows the weekly cumulative burnt areas, we can again see for 2024 that this has been a moderate year for fires. They're not increasing, they're actually decreasing, according to this data. The next chart shows the weekly emissions of CO2. So that's how much actually material is being burnt in CO2 and released from the trees and the leaves and the biomass material. Well, again, for 2024 in the end of December, it's one of the lowest on record. And again, if we look at the weekly cumulative emissions, it's also well below average. So the idea that things are getting worse, the data simply does not show that. The same thing with particulate emissions, PM2.5, that's the very fine black soot and dust that is the real concern for health. Again, this year, 2024, we're seeing some of the lowest on record. And we look at for the weekly cumulative emissions throughout the year, again, well below average. The number of fires we look at, and we know the number of fires are most of them are lit by arsonists. We can see for 2024 this year, December's about on average of previous years. But over the actually year, the number of fires that they've been detected is actually below average. And the one that is most telling is the weekly severity rating. Now, remember, our Prime Minister told us that these fires are becoming more frequent and more intense. We can see they're not becoming more frequent, but are they becoming more intense? Well, the severity rating there shows that, yes, for the last week they were more intense, but for the most of November and December, they're below average. If we look at the weekly cumulative severity rating, that chart, you can see again 2024 has been below average. So what the Prime Minister is talking about is complete and utter nonsense. And then finally there's this chart here which shows the long-term fire trend in Australia about the areas being burnt. And you can see again here it is a declining trend. So we're just being told complete nonsense. The public is being gaslit. This is all done for political purposes. This is people exploiting other people's hardship and tragedy and loss from bushfires, exploiting it for a political purpose. Bushfires are part of the Australian landscape. They always have been, they always will be. The less burn-offs we do, the more areas we declare as national park, the more intense these fires will be. But the evidence and the data clearly shows that what the Prime Minister is saying is patently and utterly false. Fires in Australia, wild bushfires in Australia, are not becoming more frequent. They are not becoming more intense. And though we're not losing more area to fire. The science on this is absolutely clear, shown by the satellites. But don't ever expect anyone from the ABC to tell you these facts.